Jake Morrison looked out at the massive space station ahead of them. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen. The metal walls curved and twisted in ways that hurt his eyes to follow. Strange lights blinked in patterns he could not understand. This was the home of the Galactic Council. "First time seeing something like this?" asked Dr. Lisa Carter from the seat next to him. She was the smartest person Jake knew. Earth had sent her along to help with the science talks. "Yeah," Jake said. "Makes you feel pretty small, doesn't it?" Their ship, the UES Horizon, moved slowly toward the docking bay. Commander Pete Davis sat in the pilot seat, his hands steady on the controls. Behind them, engineer Amy Rodriguez checked her equipment one more time. Pilot Steve Johnson studied the star charts, making notes about their journey. They had traveled for 6 months to get here. Earth had received the invitation 3 years ago. It came as radio signals from deep space. The message was simple but amazing. There was a government that ruled most of the galaxy. They wanted to meet humans. The whole world had gone crazy with excitement. Finally, they were not alone. There were others out there among the stars. Smart beings who had built cities on distant worlds. People who could teach humans about the universe. Jake was Earth's first ambassador to the stars. He had studied every language on Earth. He had learned about every culture and government, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Docking bay opening," Pete said. "Here we go." The station was even more impressive from the inside. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft light. Water flowed in impossible directions, forming shapes in the air before falling back down. The gravity felt different here, lighter somehow. A group of beings waited for them in the main hall. Jake had seen pictures, but seeing them in person was something else. The Zephyrians looked like living crystals, tall and sharp, with light moving through their bodies. The nautiloids were like giant squids, but they floated in bubbles of water that moved with them. "Welcome, humans of Earth," said one of the Zephyrians. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am High Counselor Vexthala. We have waited long to meet your species." Jake stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you for inviting us. I am Ambassador Jake Morrison. We are honored to be here." The first few days went well. The council showed them around the station. They saw rooms full of technology that seemed like magic. Ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. Machines that could build entire cities in days. Medicine that could cure any disease. Lisa spent most of her time with the council's scientists. They showed her star maps that covered millions of worlds. They explained how they kept peace across such a huge area, how they helped young species grow and learn. "It's incredible," Lisa told Jake over dinner. "They've been doing this for millions of years. They've helped thousands of species reach the stars." But Jake noticed things that bothered him. The council members were always watching them. Guards followed them everywhere, though they called them guides. And when he asked about certain topics, the council members would change the subject quickly. On the 4th day, Lisa made a discovery that changed everything. She was working late in the science lab when she found the old files. They were hidden deep in the computer system, in a section marked as historical records. Most of it was in languages she could not read, but some parts had been translated into basic galactic common. The files told a different story about the Council. They spoke of species that had been removed when they became too advanced, worlds that had been cleansed when their people asked too many questions, technologies that had been restricted to keep the balance of power. Lisa's hands shook as she read. The Council was not the peaceful government they claimed to be. They were killers. They destroyed any species that might challenge their rule. She copied the files to a small data device and ran back to find Jake. "We have to leave," she whispered when she found him in his room. "Now. Tonight." Jake read the files and felt sick. "How many?" he asked. "Hundreds of species. Maybe thousands. All wiped out because they got too smart or too strong. They found Pete, Amy, and Steve. The 5 humans met in Jake's room and spoke in whispers. "The ship is ready," Pete said, "but they're watching us. How do we get past the guards?" "I can create a distraction in the engine bay," Amy said. "Something that looks like an accident but gives us cover." The navigation system is locked onto our arrival path, Steve added. I can break us free, but not quietly. Jake made the hardest decision of his life. Do it. We have to warn Earth. But they were too late. As Amy worked on her distraction, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The voice of High Counselor Vexithala echoed from speakers everywhere. The human contamination has been detected. All units contain the threat immediately. Guards rushed toward their location. These were not the polite guides from before. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Run, Pete shouted. The 5 humans raced through the twisting corridors of the station. Behind them, the guards gave chase. Energy blasts scorched the walls around them. They reached the docking bay just as the station's weapons powered up. Pete threw himself into the pilot seat and fired the engines. The UES Horizon shot out of the bay, just as the first blast hit the space where they had been. They're jamming our communications, Steve said. I can't get a signal to Earth. Then we go there. Ourselves, Jake said. We have to warn them. But as their ship raced toward the edge of the system, they saw something that made their hearts stop. The space around them filled with Council warships. Hundreds of them, all heading in the same direction, toward Earth. They're going to destroy our world, Lisa whispered. Pete pushed the engines to their limit, but they were too far away. Too slow. They could only watch as the Council fleet jumped to faster than light speed and disappeared. By the time the UES Horizon reached Earth's solar system 3 days later, it was over. The blue marble that had been their home was now a burned rock, floating in space. The cities were gone, the forests were ash. 7 billion people had died in a matter of hours. The 5 survivors of humanity floated in their small ship, looking at the grave of their species. Around them, the Council fleet was already leaving, their work complete. They killed everyone, Amy said, tears floating in the zero gravity. Jake stared at the dead world and made a promise that would echo across the centuries. Not everyone. We're still here. And someday, somehow, we're going to make them pay for this. The UES Horizon drifted at the edge of known space, its hull scarred from months of running and hiding. Inside the cramped ship, 5 humans tried to build a future from the ashes of their past. Colonel Ryan Brooks had been a military advisor on the original mission. Now he was the closest thing humanity had to a leader. He studied star charts in the dim light of the ship's emergency power, looking for places where they could hide and rebuild. The outer rim, he said to the others, beyond the Council's regular patrol routes. There are dead systems out there, worlds they think are worthless. Dr. Helen Martinez worked at a small medical station she had built from spare parts. Before Earth died, she had been a genetic researcher. Now she was trying to solve humanity's biggest problem. There were only 5 of them left. 5 people could not rebuild a species. I've been thinking about our DNA, she said. We have samples from the crew medical files. Not much, but maybe enough. If I can figure out how to change our genes, we might be able to have children who can survive in different environments. Amy Rodriguez had become their chief engineer by necessity. She kept their stolen ship running with whatever materials they could find. The ship won't last much longer, she told them. We need to find somewhere to land, somewhere we can build proper tools. Steve Johnson spent his time studying the navigation data they had collected. He was mapping the empty spaces between the Council's territories. There's a system about 2 months from here, he said. 3 dead planets around a dying star, no resources worth mining. The Council marked it as uninhabitable. Perfect, Ryan said. Uninhabitable means they won't bother checking on it. Jake Morrison sat quietly in the corner, still wearing his ambassador's uniform. It was dirty and torn now, but he refused to take it off. It reminded him of what they had lost and what they owed the dead. We need more than just survival, he said. We need to make sure this never happens again to anyone. The journey to the dead system took longer than expected. Their ship broke down twice, forcing Amy to work miracles with broken parts and hope, but they made it. The planet they chose had been a garden world once. Now it was a frozen ball of rock with a thin atmosphere, but it had caves deep underground where they could hide and build. The first years were the hardest. They lived like cave dwellers, growing food in underground gardens lit by artificial suns. Helen worked day and night on her genetic research, trying to unlock the secrets of human adaptation. Ryan organized their daily life like a military operation. Everyone had jobs. Everyone had duties. They could not afford to waste time or resources. When they were the last 5 humans in the galaxy, their first breakthrough came in the 3rd year. Helen succeeded in changing human genes to let people breathe different kinds of air and eat different kinds of food. The process was dangerous and painful, but it worked. "We can adapt to almost any world now," she told the others as she recovered from her own transformation. "Our children will be able to live anywhere." By the 10th year, they had built a small underground city. Amy had figured out how to make machines that could make other machines. Steve had mapped dozens of nearby systems where they could spread out and hide. Ryan had been training the first generation of new humans in the arts of war and survival, children who had never seen Earth but carried its memory in their hearts. "Never forget," he told them during their daily lessons. "Never forgive. Never again." Jake had become something like a priest and a historian. He made sure every child knew the story of Earth. He taught them about the Council's crimes and the debt that would someday need to be paid. As the decades passed, humanity spread to dozens of hidden worlds. Each colony was small and secret, built inside asteroids or on planets the Council thought were worthless. They learned to live in space, in the deep cold between stars, in the burning heat near dying suns. Helen's children could breathe poison gas and swim in liquid methane. Ryan's students could fight in zero gravity and hide in the shadows of space. Amy's engineers could build cities from space dust and starlight, but they were not the only ones in the empty spaces beyond the Council's reach. In their 50th year of exile, they met the Kresh. The Kresh looked like giant insects with many eyes and arms that bent in wrong directions. They had been running from the Council for 300 years. "The crystal ones came to our world," the Kresh leader told Jake through a translation machine Amy had built. "They said we were growing too fast. Too many of us. They burned our cities and took our children for slaves." More refugees found them as the years went by. The Villani, who looked like living shadows. The Thurok, who were made of living metal. The Whisper folk, who had no bodies at all and lived as pure thought. All of them had the same story. The Council had decided they were dangerous and tried to destroy them. The survivors had fled to the dark places between the stars, hiding and hoping to be forgotten. Ryan saw the opportunity. "We can't beat the Council alone," he told Jake. "But we don't have to be alone." Under human leadership, the refugee species formed a secret alliance. They shared technology and knowledge. They helped each other build hidden fleets and weapons. Most importantly, they watched. Human scouts, changed by Helen's science to look like other species, infiltrated Council space. They recorded every crime, every genocide, every act of oppression. They learned the Council's weaknesses and mapped their territories. They also began to protect others. When the Council decided to cleanse a young species, mysterious ships would appear to help the survivors escape. When Council slave ships traveled through the outer systems, they would disappear without a trace. The Council began to notice that fewer of their operations were succeeding. Ships vanished. Colonies they tried to destroy were evacuated before they arrived. Rebellions had weapons and supplies that came from nowhere, but they never suspected that their old victims had become their hidden enemy. By the 100th year, humanity had become something the Council could not have imagined. They were no longer the desperate survivors who had fled Earth's burning corpse. They were the secret guardians of the galaxy's forgotten and oppressed. Helen, now ancient but kept alive by her own genetic improvements, looked up at the stars. From her laboratory on the hidden world they called New Hope. "Our children are ready," she told Ryan. "The question is, are we?" Ryan, his hair white but his body still strong from decades of enhancement, studied the reports from across the galaxy. Council space was weakening. Their member species were growing restless. Resources were running short. "Not yet," he said, "but soon. Very soon we're going to remind them what happens when you try to kill humanity." In the darkness between the stars, 1,000,000 hidden humans and their allies waited and prepared for the day when the galaxy would learn that some betrayals echo across time itself. The reckoning was coming, and the Council had no idea what they had created in the ashes of Earth. High Counselor Vexithala stood in the crystal chamber at the center of the Council station, the same station where humans had first arrived 500,000 years ago. But now the walls were cracked and dim. Half the lights had failed years ago, and nobody bothered to fix them. The Council was dying. Admiral Glutheron floated in his water bubble next to the crystal being. His tentacles moved in worried patterns as he spoke. The rebellion on Cathara Prime has spread to 6 more systems. Our forces can't contain it. What about the Zorn Collective? Vexithala asked. Surely they remain loyal. The Zorn stopped sending tribute ships 3 months ago. They claim pirates are attacking their convoys, but our scouts find no evidence of any pirate fleets. Vexithala's crystalline body flickered with angry red light. For millions of years, the Council had ruled through fear and force. Member species paid tribute and obeyed orders, or they were destroyed. It had always worked before, but now everything was falling apart. Ships disappeared in hyperspace. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Rebellious worlds received weapons and support from unknown sources. Most disturbing of all, some of their cleansing operations had failed completely. They would arrive at a world marked for destruction only to find it already evacuated. Do we have any leads on who is helping? These rebels, Vexithala asked. None, Glutheron admitted. Our intelligence networks report the same thing everywhere. Unknown ships appearing and disappearing. Advanced technology that we cannot identify. It is as if ghosts are fighting us. Far beyond the Council's crumbling borders, Captain Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the human warship Retribution. The ship was 5 miles long and bristled with weapons that could crack moons in half, but more importantly, it was completely invisible to Council sensors. Status report, Alex said to his crew. The evacuation of Hendara 7 is complete, reported his tactical officer. 40 million civilians relocated to the sanctuary worlds before the Council fleet arrived. Good. What about the supply run to the Villani resistance? Delivered successfully. They now have enough weapons to hold their system for at least a year. Alex nodded. He was the great-great-grandson of Amy Rodriguez, the engineer who had helped humanity escape Earth's destruction. Like all modern humans, he had been changed by Dr. Martinez's genetic science. He could survive in space without a suit, and his mind could process information faster than any computer. A communication signal reached the ship. Alex recognized the quantum signature immediately. It was from Human High Command. Fleet Admiral Tony Mitchell appeared on the main screen. He was an old man by human standards, nearly 300 years old. But the genetic treatments kept him strong and sharp. Alex, the Admiral said, new orders from the Strategic Council. Operation Remembrance is approved. Phase 1 begins immediately. Alex felt his heart skip. After 500,000 years of hiding and waiting, humanity was finally ready to reveal itself. Understood, sir. What are our parameters? Dr. Ben Clark has identified the Council's 3 most critical supply routes. We're going to cut them off completely. But this time, we don't hide. We let them see us. On the hidden world that served as humanity's capital, Dr. Ben Clark worked in a vast library filled with the history of the galaxy. He knew more about the Council than they knew about themselves. For centuries, human spies had copied their records and mapped their weaknesses. The Zephyrians depend on energy crystals from the outer halo, he explained to the gathered military commanders. Cut off that supply and their entire infrastructure starts to fail within months. The Nautiloids need rare minerals for their water systems, added Intelligence Director Kate Sullivan. Without them, they can't survive on most worlds. And the collective species that make up the rest of the Council? Asked General Nicole Green. They're held together by fear and habit, Ben said. Once they see that the Council can be challenged successfully, many of them will turn. The first sign that something had changed came when Council patrol ships started disappearing near the Kepler Nebula. Not destroyed, simply gone without a trace or distress signal. When the Council sent a larger fleet to investigate, they found something that should have been impossible. A single alien ship waited for them in empty space. It was sleek and beautiful, made of materials they had never seen before. The ship broadcast a message on all frequencies. The voice that spoke was calm and clear. "Attention, Council forces. You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. This space is now under the protection of the Human Federation." The Council fleet commander, a proud Zephyrian named Kexmoth, laughed when he heard the transmission. "Humans? But humans are extinct. We destroyed them ourselves ages ago." "Sir," his sensor operator said nervously, "I'm reading massive energy, signatures all around us, multiple contacts decloaking." Suddenly, the empty space around the Council fleet filled with ships, dozens of them, then hundreds, all bearing the blue and white emblem of humanity, a world surrounded by stars. The human ships did not attack. Instead, they simply surrounded the Council fleet and waited. "This is Captain Danny Foster of the Human Federation Navy," came another transmission. "Your vessels are completely outmatched. Surrender now and you will not be harmed. Continue hostile actions and you will be destroyed." Kexmoth had ruled star systems and commanded the fear of entire species. He would not be intimidated by ghosts. "All ships open fire." The Council weapons struck the human vessels and simply disappeared, absorbed by energy shields that glowed with impossible colors. In return, the human ships fired once each. Every Council vessel found itself completely disabled. Engines dead, weapons offline, life support failing. But they were alive. "Your crews will be rescued and returned to Council space," Captain Foster announced. "Tell your leaders that humanity has returned. Tell them the reckoning has begun." The news reached the Council chambers within hours. Vexthala's crystal body turned black with shock when he heard the report. "Impossible," he whispered. "We killed them all. We watched their world burn." "Apparently not all of them," Glutheron said grimly, "and they've been busy while we weren't looking." More reports flooded in over the following days. Human ships appeared throughout Council space, but they didn't attack civilian targets. Instead, they struck with surgical precision at military bases and supply lines. Every operation was flawlessly executed. Every strike left Council forces helpless but alive. Most terrifying of all, the humans seemed to know everything. They appeared exactly where Council forces were weakest. They knew which ships carried what cargo. They struck at precisely the right moment to cause maximum disruption with minimum casualties. It was as if they had been watching and planning for centuries. Dr. Laura Adams, humanity's chief diplomat, broadcast a message that reached every world in Council space. She appeared as a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, but her words carried the weight of 500,000 years of anger. "People of the galaxy," she said, "you have been lied to for millions of years. The Galactic Council is not your protector. They are murderers who destroy any species that grows too strong or asks too many questions." Images flashed on screens across the galaxy. Records of the Council's secret operations. Lists of species that had been cleansed. Evidence of genocide, on a scale that shocked even hardened soldiers. "We are humanity," Dr. Adams continued. 500,000 years ago, the Council tried to kill us all because we discovered their crimes. We survived. We grew strong. And now we have returned to make sure their reign of terror ends forever. The effect was immediate and devastating. Rebellions erupted on 1,000 worlds. Council member species began demanding answers about the accusations. Supply lines collapsed as entire star systems declared independence. In the crystal chamber, Vexthala watched his empire crumble around him. The species they had tried to extinct was back, stronger than ever, and the galaxy was finally learning the truth. "What do we do?" Glutheron asked desperately. Vexthala's body flickered with defeated light. "We prepare for the end. The humans are coming, and after what we did to them, I do not think they will show mercy." But he was wrong about one thing. The humans weren't coming for revenge. They were coming for something far more terrifying to the Council than death. They were coming For justice. Admiral Chris Parker stood in the command center of the massive human battleship Liberty. Around him, holographic displays showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Council strongholds. Blue dots showed human forces. Green dots represented the growing number of species that had joined the rebellion. The green dots were spreading fast. Status report, Chris said to his staff. Commander Rachel Webb stepped forward. The siege of Arcturus Station is complete. The Council garrison surrendered, without firing a shot. We've freed over 2 million prisoners from their labor camps. Casualties? None on our side. 17 Council soldiers with minor injuries. They're receiving medical treatment aboard our ships. Chris nodded. That was the human way now. They could have destroyed every Council base in hours, but they chose a different path. Every victory came with mercy. Every battle ended with healing instead of death. It confused their enemies and impressed their new allies. Dr. Karen Wright worked in the ship's science lab, studying captured Council technology. What she found there made her angry and sad at the same time. They haven't improved in 500,000 years, she told Chris during their daily briefing. Same weapons, same ships, same ideas. They got lazy because nobody could challenge them. What about their defensive systems? Pathetic. I could disable their entire fleet with equipment we consider outdated. Karen pulled up a holographic display, showing Council ship designs. Look at this. They're still using fusion reactors while we've moved to quantum energy cores. Their best shields can't stop our training weapons. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the galaxy. The Council had ruled through fear and lies, not strength. When faced with real opposition, they crumbled like old paper. Captain Danny Foster led the human forces liberating Council prison worlds. These were places where the Council sent beings who asked too many questions or grew too powerful. Entire species had been locked away for thousands of years. On the planet Despair, Danny's ships found something that broke his heart. Underground cities filled with the children and grandchildren of political prisoners. Millions of beings who had never seen sunlight or breathed free air. How long have you been here? Danny asked an old creature that looked like a walking tree with too many arms. My great-grandfather was brought here when I was young. The being said through a translation device. That was 800 years ago. We have lived in darkness ever since. Not anymore, Danny promised. Pack whatever you want to keep. You're going home. The liberation of Despair took 3 days. Human medical teams treated beings who had been sick for generations. Human engineers brought light and clean air to the underground cities. Human diplomats contacted the home worlds of every imprisoned species. The galaxy watched in amazement as humans did something the Council never had. They gave people their freedom and asked for nothing in return, but not everyone was happy about humanity's return. In the deepest parts of Council space, the old leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. Vex Thala's crystal body was now completely black with rage and fear. Around the table sat the rulers of the oldest and most powerful Council species. This cannot continue, Vex Thala said. Every day we lose more systems. More species turn against us. If we don't act soon, there will be nothing left. What can we do? Asked Thuvan Kor, the metal-skinned leader of the Durranian Empire. Their technology is beyond ours. Their ships are faster and stronger. They know our every move before we make it. We still have one advantage, said a voice from the shadows. The speaker was Malthorn the Ancient, oldest member of the Council. Nobody knew what species he belonged to anymore. He had lived so long that his body was more machine than flesh. What advantage? Glutheron demanded. They still care about innocent lives, Malthorn said with a voice like grinding metal. The humans could have killed us all by now, but they haven't. They're trying to be the heroes of this story. And heroes have weaknesses. They won't sacrifice civilians to win. They'll risk their own lives to save their enemies. Malthorn's mechanical eyes glowed with evil light. We use that against them. The plan Malthorn suggested was horrible, even by Council standards. They would take hostages from the species that had joined humanity. Millions of civilians would be threatened with death unless the humans surrendered. It's barbaric. Glutharin said, though his voice was weak. It's survival, Vexathala replied. We've ruled this galaxy for millions of years. I will not let some upstart species take that away from us. But the Council had forgotten something important. For 500,000 years, humans had been watching them. Human spies had infiltrated every level of Council society. They knew about the hostage plan before the Council finished making it. Fleet Admiral Tony Mitchell called an emergency meeting of the Human High Command. The holographic conference included every major human leader from across the galaxy. They're planning to take hostages, Tony announced. Civilian populations on 12 different worlds. They think we'll surrender to save innocent lives. How many people are we talking about? Asked General Nicole Green. 400 million beings spread across the target worlds. The room fell silent. Every human leader felt the weight of those numbers. We can't let them do it, said Dr. Ben Clark. But we also can't risk those lives. Actually, we can do both, said a new voice. Captain Sam Rogers had joined the meeting from his stealth ship near Council headquarters. I've been studying their communication networks. If we move fast enough, we can warn every target world and evacuate them before the Council forces arrive. That's impossible, Tony said. Even with our fastest ships, we can't reach all 12 worlds in time. We don't have to, Sam replied, with a smile. We have allies now. The species we've freed, the rebels we've armed, the hidden networks we've built over the centuries. For the first time since Earth burned, we're not alone. The operation that followed became known as the Great Evacuation. Human ships worked with rebel fleets and newly freed species to warn and evacuate all 12 target worlds. In 72 hours, 400 million beings were moved to safety. When Council forces arrived at the target worlds, they found empty cities and abandoned settlements. But they also found something else. Messages broadcast from every communication system on every world. The messages were simple and devastating. Complete records of the Council's plan. Audio recordings of their leaders discussing the murder of innocent civilians. Video evidence of their willingness to commit genocide to stay in power. The galaxy erupted in rage. Species that had remained neutral now joined the rebellion. Council member governments fell as their own people rose up in disgust. Even some Council military units switched sides rather than serve leaders who would murder children to win a war. Within a week, the Council controlled less than 10% of their former territory. Vexathala stood alone in the crystal chamber, watching reports of another defeat, another lost world, another species declaring independence. Glutharin had fled days ago. Most of the other Council members had either surrendered or gone into hiding. Sir, came a weak voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission. It's from the human fleet. Put it through, Vexathala said tiredly. The image that appeared was of a human woman in a simple blue uniform. She looked kind but determined. This was President Emma Taylor, elected leader of the Human Federation. High Counselor Vexathala, Emma said formally. I am Emma Taylor, President of the Human Federation and representative of the Free Galaxy Alliance. I am calling to offer the formal surrender of all Council forces. Surrender? Vexathala's voice cracked like breaking glass. You want us to surrender to you? Not to us, Emma corrected. To justice. To the billions of beings you've murdered over the millennia. To the families you've destroyed and the species you've enslaved. And if we refuse? Emma's expression didn't change, but her words carried the weight of 500,000 years of human determination. Then we will come and get you. But I think you know that resistance is pointless now. Your empire is gone. Your allies have abandoned you. Your own people have turned against you. Vexathala looked around the empty chamber. Once it had been filled with the representatives of 1,000 species, all bowing before Council power. Now he stood alone among the broken crystals and failing lights. What happens to us if we surrender? You will face trial for your crimes, Emma said simply. You will be judged by the very species you tried to destroy, and whatever sentence they decide, that is what you will receive. And if the sentence is death? Then you will die. But you will die with more mercy than you ever showed your victims. Vexathala stood silent for a long moment. Outside the chamber, he could hear the sounds of his station falling apart. Systems failing, guards deserting. The last symbols of council power crumbling into dust. I will consider your offer, he said finally. You have 24 hours. Emma replied. After that, we're coming anyway. The transmission ended, leaving Vexathala alone with the ghosts of his empire and the weight of his crimes. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's greatest predator had become prey, and the hunters were closing in. Captain Joe Williams stepped off his transport ship and onto the council station for the first time in 500,000 years. The last human to walk these halls had been his ancestor, Jake Morrison, fleeing for his life as Earth burned. Behind him, now Joe commanded a fleet of 1,000 ships waiting outside. The station that had once seemed so mighty now looked old and broken. The crystal walls were cracked. The impossible water flows had dried up. Even the gravity felt weak and unstable. Beside him walked President Emma Taylor and a team of human officials. They had come not as conquerors, but as representatives of justice. It's smaller than I imagined, Emma said as they walked through the empty corridors. Fear makes everything look bigger, Joe replied. Our ancestors were impressed by this place because they wanted to believe in something greater than themselves. Now we know better. They found Vexathala waiting in the main council chamber. The ancient crystal being stood alone among empty seats, where once the rulers of the galaxy had sat. His body flickered with dim, defeated light. So, Vexathala said, his voice like wind through broken glass, the extinct species returns to judge its betters. We're not here to judge you, Emma said calmly. That honor belongs to those you've wronged. Behind the humans came a procession that made Vexathala's light dim even further. Representatives of every species the council had oppressed walked into the chamber, the tree-like beings from despair, the metal-skinned survivors of the Duranian purges, the shadow people of Vale, hundreds of species that the council had tried to destroy or enslave. And leading them all was an elderly figure that made Vexathala stumble backward in shock. Judge Marcus Hill was old even by human standards, nearly 400 years old, but his mind was sharp and his purpose was clear. He had spent 2 centuries studying galactic law and preparing for this moment. High Counselor Vexathala, Marcus said formally, you are charged with genocide, slavery, and crimes against sentient, life spanning 4 million years. How do you plead? I plead the right of the strong over the weak, Vexathala replied, trying to sound defiant. We ruled because we had the power to rule. That is the law of nature. Nature doesn't build courts, said Prosecutor Lisa Grant as she stepped forward. Nature doesn't demand justice. Only civilized beings do that. And today, civilization has come for you. The trial that followed lasted 3 months and was broadcast across the galaxy. Every day brought new evidence of the Council's crimes. Survivors told their stories. Human spies presented recordings and documents collected over centuries of watching. The galaxy learned about the Kepler massacre, where the Council had destroyed an entire solar system because one planet had developed faster than light travel. They heard about the Great Purge of the Outer Rim, where 47 species had been wiped out in a single month for the crime of forming an alliance. Most horrible of all, they discovered the Truth Archives, secret council records that listed every species they had destroyed and why. The files went back millions of years and contained billions of names. Exhibit 47-2R91, Lisa announced on the trial's final day. The complete records of the human genocide, including planning documents, execution orders, and celebration messages sent between council members after Earth's destruction. She played a recording of Vexathala himself, made 500,000 years ago. His younger voice was full of pride and satisfaction. The human contamination has been successfully eliminated. All 7 billion specimens have been processed. Their world has been sterilized. The threat to galactic stability is over. The courtroom fell silent. Even after all they had heard, The casual way the council had discussed the murder of an entire species shocked everyone. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Judge Marcus asked. Vexithala's crystal body was now completely black. "I regret nothing. We did what was necessary to maintain order. If we had not acted, chaos would have consumed the galaxy." "Chaos like freedom?" Emma asked from the gallery. "Chaos like justice? Chaos like species being allowed to grow and learn without fear?" "You understand nothing," Vexithala snapped. "You are children playing with forces beyond your comprehension. Without the Council's guidance, the galaxy will tear itself apart." "The galaxy seems to be doing fine without you," Marcus observed. "In fact, it's doing better than it has in millions of years." That was true. In the months since the Council's fall, something amazing had happened. Without the constant fear of extermination, species across the galaxy had begun to cooperate in ways never seen before. Trade flowed freely between worlds. Scientific knowledge was shared openly. Young species received help and guidance from older ones without strings attached. The Galactic Senate that replaced the Council had representatives from over 10,000 species, and decisions were made by voting instead of force. The verdict, when it came, surprised no one. "Guilty on all charges," Judge Marcus announced. "The sentence is exile to the void between, to spend eternity drifting in empty space with only your crimes for company." Vexthala laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "You think isolation frightens me? I have lived for millions of years. I will endure this punishment and return when you are dust." "Actually," said Dr. Helen Martinez as she entered the courtroom, "you won't." Helen was the last survivor of the original 5 humans who had escaped Earth. At nearly 500,000 years old, she was kept alive by genetic science that bordered on magic. She carried with her a small device that hummed with quiet power. "This is a memory extractor," she explained. "It will remove all your knowledge of science, technology, and civilization. You'll remember your crimes, but not how to build ships or weapons or communicate across space. You'll drift in the dark, knowing what you've done but powerless to escape. Your change." "That's monstrous," Vexthala whispered. "It's merciful," Helen replied. "Your victims didn't get to keep their memories when you killed them. At least you get to live." The exile was carried out the next day. Vexthala and the few remaining Council leaders were placed in simple escape pods and launched into the void between galaxies. They would drift forever in the empty darkness alone with their guilt. 6 months later, Captain Sam Rogers stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest starship, the UES New Earth. Through the transparent metal windows, he could see the construction of something that had never existed before. The Galactic Assembly Station was 10 times larger than the old Council headquarters, but instead of being built as a fortress, it was designed as a meeting place. Gardens from 1,000 worlds grew in its halls. Art from every known species decorated its walls, and in its center was a memorial to every being the Council had killed. "It's beautiful," said Captain Tina Collins as she joined Sam at the window. "Hard to believe it's only been a year since we revealed ourselves." "Feels longer," Sam replied. "Sometimes I think about our ancestors, Jake Morrison and the others. They never got to see this." "They saw it," Tina said softly. "Every time they chose to help instead of hurt. Every time they saved someone instead of getting revenge. They planted the seeds. We just got to watch them grow." A chime sounded through the ship. Sam's communication officer announced that they had received launch clearance for their next mission. The UES New Earth was the first ship in humanity's new exploration program. Instead of hiding in the shadows, humans were now leading expeditions beyond the galactic rim. They were looking for new life, new civilizations, new wonders to share with the galaxy. "Ready to make history?" Tina asked as she headed toward the bridge. "We already did," Sam replied, taking one last look at the assembly station. "Now we're just making sure it doesn't repeat." The ship's engines came alive with power that could reshape reality itself. But instead of using that power to conquer or control, Humanity used it to explore and discover. As the UES New Earth disappeared into the star-filled void beyond the galaxy, it carried with it the hopes and dreams of trillions of beings. The age of fear was over. The age of wonder had begun. And somewhere in the empty darkness between galaxies, the last members of the Galactic Council drifted in silence, finally understanding what they had tried so hard to destroy. Humanity had never been the threat to galactic stability. They had been its salvation. The galaxy was finally free, and the future belonged to everyone.